In today's culture, nearly all aspects of children's lives are in some way influenced by sex. The more you learn what society is teaching your children, the more you will want to protect them from this harmful influence. I'm joined by Cliff Ford, an Ontario dad who single-handedly busted an internet sex ring after his daughter was targeted, and Jon Mitchell from the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada. Thank you both so much for joining us today.
Thanks,
Cliff, before we get into your story, because it is so powerful and so strong, Peter, talk to us a little bit about what is the sexualization of teen culture?
Yeah, well, sexualization is really, it's an outside influence, and it's also an internal aspect as well. So certainly the outside influence of a culture that is objectifying our young people in a way that's inappropriate and pressing a sexuality that's just developmentally not appropriate onto young people. But it's also expressed in another way, right? It's expressed in a way where a young person might try to find identity or meaning in a certain behavior, a sexual behavior that just isn't right, it isn't developmentally correct as well, and so it's very much this outward expression of self as well that's just misguided and just inappropriate in many ways, and we're finding that's happening earlier and earlier. We're finding that that age group between 8 and 12, that middle childhood, is disappearing before our eyes in many ways, and that's where we're seeing a lot of this ground being lost and a lot of things that are concerning us.
Wow, 8 and 12. Cliff, your daughter, she was only 12 years old when she was targeted.
That's correct,
right?
yeah.
Tell us about that story, about how you kind of figured out what was going on.
So it started last January of 2014. I was just finishing up work for the day, and I looked at my email on my phone and saw an inappropriate message targeted towards my daughter's
email. Because I think this is so important that we discuss this. Your daughter was on the internet, and everything she does on the internet, right? It comes to your phone or your computer.
Yeah, so part of the rules of our household was that if they wanted access to anything online, we had to have not only their usernames and passwords so that we could jump in if there was a problem, but we also had their emails mirrored to my phone so that I could just keep track of what was happening. Not reading every message that comes from their friends or family members, but if something seemed off, I could jump in and help out.
Because it's not really about trust, it's more about the naivety of a child who's just young, who doesn't really know what they're getting into, correct?
Yeah, and unfortunately there are those out there that will manipulate them so that they think they're doing the right thing by talking to somebody, and it turns out it's not even the person they think they're talking to.
Right, okay, so tell me what you saw when you got this email to your phone.
Well, the message was fairly simple. It was somebody was trying to encourage her to come back into a chat room to talk with him, and the subject line said, "Hey, sexy," so I knew instantly that there was something inappropriate happening.
That's so disturbing. So what did you do?
I instantly took over her accounts and made sure that the passwords were changed and that there was no way that this guy could continue to go after her. I then spent the next 3 days conversing with this person to find out exactly who he was, what his intentions were, and to put together a file that I could turn over to the police.
And you said kind of in your bio, he sent your daughter, but you received it very explicit photos.
Photos and videos.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was trying to encourage her to do the same. It had started just prior to when I had gotten involved, and that was why he was encouraging her to come back onto the chat site. But even as I started conversing, he was pressing the issue of, please send me a picture, please send me a video, I'd like to see your body, inappropriate things for a 12-year-old to be exposed to.
Absolutely. So you took this to the police, and what happened?
Yeah, so I took it down to his local police once I discovered where he was from, and he was from the Ohio area. And his police then coordinated with local police here, and the two worked together to basically bring him in. As they arrested him, it uncovered a whole child pornography ring of individuals who were getting pictures and videos from kids and sharing it amongst themselves.
Well, thankfully, you were able to step in and protect your daughter from this, but a lot of parents are not able to protect or don't even know that they should be protecting their kids from this. So, Peter, how can parents protect their children from getting caught in a situation like this?
Well, I think Cliff has actually illustrated one of those important ways, and that's just moderating the media that kids are using and being familiar with it. There are studies that suggest that actually, if you understand yourself as a parent and you have thought out why do we have these certain pieces of media in the home and how we use them, you're more likely to keep the guidelines that you do set up. You're more likely to follow those guidelines, and you're bound to see better better results for that as well. And that's what the data shows us. So it is in a certain way holding some accountability there by creating some guidelines, and those conversations are going to change as your young person moves to preteen to adult, and how you're going to go about setting up those guidelines and inviting them in to help set up those together. But certainly making that clear, even writing it down can help in terms of having those guidelines, so that we can refer back to those guidelines when something goes awry. And I think that one of the most important things is to feel comfortable to be able to talk about it, and for Cliff to be able to talk with his daughter about it and to say, what's going on here, and have that open conversation. That starts early. That starts long before the kids are into technology. It starts with the type of household, the type of home that we're creating, the warmth, the nurturing relationship, setting the guidelines, creating the right kind of relationship with our kids so that they will come to us. And even as they become older, into their teens, and it seems like they don't really want to talk to us, they actually desperately need us to listen to them and to affirm them.
But also what's so important about that is parents have a huge role in their kids' lives, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Peter, you said something like it's caught. It's caught, not taught, right?
That's right. Sexual attitudes tend to be caught more than taught. Certainly we have to have those conversations, but how we approach certain issues, how we view media and how we interact with that is always being watched and modeled, and that's an important one.
Right, and we've been talking a lot about 50 Shades of Grey this entire month, and you know, sometimes hearing your mother say, I'm going to go see, or watching your mom read the book or say, I'm going to go see this movie, or, you know, things like that kids are seeing. Are you very careful about doing things like that in front of your kids, you and your wife?
Well, certainly, I think, you know, kids and teens, they absorb a lot from the influence of their parents, but it's not just the parents. There's certainly a lot in the culture around us that is constantly bringing home a sexualized message to young, and particularly in young women, you know, seeing people that they want to aspire to be, and it's mainly about body image, it's mainly about their own sexuality, whereas, you know, and this is the conversation I have with both of my daughters, is at the age that they're at, don't worry about your sexuality and how you identify yourself. Figure out who you are as a person first. That'll come down the road in terms of understanding your own sexuality and what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. At this age, they shouldn't have to deal with that kind of an issue. They should be able to just enjoy life for what it is.
Absolutely. And the media, I don't think people realize, it's infiltrating kids' lives in so many ways. I mean, you've got movies, you've got internet, you've got television. You said something, Peter, about how people don't even look at the TV anymore and think that it's a threat to their children, because it's just kind of, it's there. It just is.
It is the forgotten element in the home. We're so concerned about internet-connected devices, and we're concerned about mobile devices that we forget that the TV also is an influence. And particularly with really young children, you know, the percentages of kids that have a TV in their room can be astounding when you start to look at it and think about it. So I think there's a couple things that parents can do. One is to set those guidelines. One of the other things that we know is when parents are co-viewing television in various aspects, various media aspects, and be able to walk through and help young people identify, okay, what's the worldview here? What is the message here? What is this saying to us? And to remember that, as we've said, our kids are growing, they're maturing, their brains are developing, they're not fully mature yet. That aspect that calculates risk in the brain is still developing in young people, and so it's important to help them think through. When they see something that's hypersexualized, a pop star or whatever, we can kind of discern that. But as a kid, what are they thinking? How are they seeing this plastic sexuality? How do they understand that? And how does that relate to them?
And how is that going to affect them later in life? So, Peter, when is enough going to be enough? I mean, are we just going to continue to get worse as time goes on?
Yes, I don't know. I don't know what the future holds. I'm certainly looking back to that question of how do we get here. I think part of the aspect is that we are seeing in our society almost age islands. We're seeing older people form condo communities over here, and we have our young people here. And particularly, I think we've seen in youth culture, it's become very insular, and it's become very peer-to-peer oriented. And I think increasingly there seems to be an absence of adults in many places. And in fact, if we look at some of the surveys that have been done by the school boards of their students, we find that a large section of those kids say, there's nobody really at my school, there's no adult there that I would trust to go to in a time of trouble. That should be concerning to us, that there's this gap, that we're seeing youth culture become so insulated, so there's nobody there to help them interpret it, some of these sexualized images that are coming in. And that's why it's so important for families and for other adults to be building relationships with their kids and creating that line of communication that Cliff was just talking about. It's so critical, more than ever, I think, now.
Absolutely. And really quickly before we have to go, you had mentioned something about social justice and kids wanting to get on board and kind of fight this if they actually understand the ramifications that it's having on their society. Explain that.
Yeah, I think our kids are really wired, and we're seeing that among our young people now, to be really concerned about the world that they're in and to this real sense of justice. And so I think this is particularly an issue, the sexualization. I think the issue of pornography as well is a big issue. We're becoming I think we're understanding more and more that there's a connection between that trade and the human trafficking trade and sex trafficking as well, and that things that might look consensual aren't actually consensual. And I think if kids can kind of grasp this and understand that, I think they'll take it. They'll run with it. They will oppose it. This is a matter of drawing these connections and helping them understand how these things are all related. And I think they'll step up.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I appreciate you both coming on. Cliff, thank you for sharing your
Janet.
story. And please be sure to talk to your kids about sex and talk to them and be in communication with them about the things in media that are infiltrating their minds, because there is so much that is influencing kids today.